Welcome back with me, Melissa Ong. As Singapore heads into its May 3rd election, the political landscape is shifting, not only domestically but globally as well. A record number of young candidates under 40 have entered the fray, reflecting renewed generational momentum. But this election also coincides with Australia's own political contest, placing both democracies at the heart of an increasingly volatile Indo-Pacific. In a world order gripped by protectionism, power rivalry and transactional diplomacy, Singapore's political choices may speak volumes about ASEAN's role in a fragmenting global system. Now, joining me to share his insights is Professor BENG, a Professor of ASEAN Studies at the International Islamic University in Malaysia. Thanks for joining us, Prof. And we'd like to start with this. This election features a record 44 candidates under 40. Now, from an ASEAN Studies perspective, what does this generational shift signal about political renewal in Singapore's context? Your thoughts on this?
As and when any country has a lot of people, or especially the youth, trying to get involved in the political and policy-making process, that is always a great sign. A sign of rejuvenation, renewal, and also some kind of a renaissance trying to gain further traction in that country. But with regards to Singapore, certain caveat and caution have to be added too, because Singapore is not just a city-state or a state-city, but is actually at the forefront of reflecting how well the world adapts to globalization. And it so happens that at this particular point in time, we are actually at a very difficult and delicate point because of all the chaos that have been caused by the likes of the Trump administration imposing all forms of tariffs. So I do personally welcome the renewal and the rejuvenation of the Singapore political process. But ultimately, in dealing with questions as complex as what we are confronting right now, great power rivalry, Sino-American relationship that is fragmenting, affecting ASEAN. The most important thing is the kind of strategic depth and experience that are required to meet their counterparts and be able to talk at a very cerebral and intellectual level, eventually coming down to making the right policy for all sides to coexist and have a win-win solution.
Right, Prof. Compared to other ASEAN nations, how well is Singapore fostering youth engagement and political participation in your view?
Well, historically, if we were to go back to the epistemological study of ASEAN, Singapore was probably one of the first to have the use of ISHA, Institute of Southeast Asian Studies, within the campus of National University of Singapore. And then ever since 1970, you have all kinds of Southeast Asian Studies program in Singapore and throughout the region. But it has always been established that Singapore is at the forefront. This election, however, has very little to do with the field itself, Southeast Asian Studies, but it has a lot to do with international relations or global politics per se.
Now, Prof, do you see this influx of younger candidates leading to deeper shifts in how Singaporean politics is practiced, particularly in policy outlook and perhaps leadership style as well?
When it comes to Singapore politics, there has always been decades of aversion against joining the political opposition. On this particular occasion, you can see that you have more and more candidates willing to pledge themselves to the cause of the Workers' Party or even other opposition parties. But then the contest boils down to PAP and the Workers' Party. From that context, you can see that Singaporeans are actually showing more conviction and courage in trying to get into the whole electoral process. That having been said, it's also partly triggered by what they have observed in the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and even Thailand, because from the larger context of Southeast Asia, there have been a blossoming of democratic participation, whether from the standpoint of civil society, the non-governmental organization or political parties. So the merger of the two will actually determine the shape and the contour of Singapore and ultimately the region and the world, if I may add so.
Now, Prof, in our conversation earlier, you have described this election alongside Australia's as a window into global discomfort. Now, how might voter sentiment in both countries reflect rising anxiety over US-China tensions and geopolitical uncertainty?
Well, what is unique about this analogy is the fact that Singapore is a compact entity, city-state. Meanwhile, Australia is a larger continent. But as you and I may know very well, Australia has a very sparse and small population compared to its size. So in that sense, when the two countries actually go into the election on the same day, more or less it reflects the possibility of trying to tap into the public opinion of these two countries, one in Southeast Asia, another one in Australasia. And with regards to with Australia, for instance, it has always been seen as the deputy sheriff of the Asia Pacific. And this is a phrase that was used by the former Prime Minister John Howard himself. Now, Singapore does not see itself as deputizing on behalf of the United States in any way. But that having been said, both countries have a lot of vested interest in ensuring a balance of power that ensures the predominance and preponderance of the United States in trying to perpetuate and preserve the balance of power all across the Asia Pacific. So it will be very interesting to see how the two countries actually take those foreign policy choices into their political calculation as and when they cast the ballot.
And given Singapore's delicate balance between American security and Chinese trade, is this vote also a barometer of how well the PAP is managing that strategic tightrope?
That's a very good question, Melissa. That having been said, I would have to, again, add in a very important caveat. Singapore is a young country, and a large segment of the population was once Malayan. So they were the Malayans who then emigrated to Singapore and became a large segment of the population of 7 million people. From what I can observe, that segment of population have always been very inclined to see everything in China in a positive light. So PAP has a very delicate balancing act, because on one hand, that is the population with which they have to appeal to, but on the other hand, they also have policy preferences where they are required to understand the interests of the United States within the larger region of the Asia Pacific.
Now, lastly, in a world increasingly shaped by the zero-sum logic of relative gains, what message might Singapore's electoral outcome send to ASEAN about its own posture in an unstable global environment right now, Prof?
Whatever strong mandate that can come up from either the electoral process in Singapore or in Australia, for that matter, that will actually be a very good message, signal, and indicator, whether it is to Washington, D.C., to Wall Street, or to any political parties in the United States, that regardless of the chaos that is being generated in America right now, there are countries, regardless of their regime types and forms of government, that are not vulnerable to polarization as easily as they assume. And in that sense, these two elections can actually send a very powerful signal that we are not afraid of what is going on in the world, and we will face it with resilience and with courage.
Well, thank you for your time, Prof. We'll speak to you again soon. Well, that was Professor PHAR Kim Beng sharing his perspective on Singapore general elections.